Oh, baby, if you thought that the Golden Stallion wouldn't be doing a little show, doing a little comment about, the Star Trek Discovery trailer that just landed last night. I'm recording this on May 18th, 2017. You're kidding yourself, because you better believe I'm going to talk about when there's some new Star Trek, baby. I mean, when there's new Star Wars, certainly I talk about it, but I mean, Star Trek is... for me, it is the great love. I could tell you some stories. In fact, I'll tell you one. So, as some Sovereign Tech listeners know, I'm divorced. Years ago, I was married, and I was also, unfortunately, Christian. Sorry about that. I'm an atheist now. Don't worry. But there was my ex-wife asked me the question. she's like, because I think I was talking about Star Trek at the time, and this would have been probably a decade ago, and she, if not longer, and she's like, you love Captain Kirk more than you love me, don't you? I said, no. I was like, I love Jesus first, then I love Captain Kirk, and then I love you. And she was like, oh, she was genuinely so shocked. Like, I mean, I was kind of joking around, but really only kind of. And then I said, I was like, what? It was like, he was in my life before you were. And anyway, no, I don't go through life with that kind of logic, because, boy, you want to talk about somebody that I love more than anything and anyone in the entire universe. That, of course, is the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. And we both watched this trailer last night. And I think, and she could correct me in the future if she'd like, but her summation was of this trailer. I'll put a link in the show notes for it so you can watch it yourself as well. I don't think I need to put out a spoiler alert, because how do you spoil a trailer? Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But I mean, I guess there's a way, like, if you hadn't seen the Star Wars trailer, don't tell me what happens until I watch it. Okay, whatever. But anyway, so she, her opinion was, wow, why do we have to wait until the fall that this comes out? And that's what the trailer says, it's coming out in the fall. It does not give a date. It just says this fall, that being 2017, I assume. But she thought it looked amazing. She is excited for it. And that is, really the initial takeaway. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about this. Okay. You can already tell the timestamp when you download this episode anyway. So, but it's a short trailer, not barely a couple minutes. And, but the initial takeaway from this, and the one positive thing that most people that I'm gleaning seem to agree upon it, because this isn't without its flaws and issues, is that it's gorgeous. Like, this is a very, very pretty, production going on. Like, it's beautiful, what's on display here. So that's really the first thing to say. I mean, and I think that's the obvious positive is, I mean, just like the overall quality looks fantastic. Some people had issues, like, I mean, there's a bunch of lens flares and all this stuff. And I agree with the assessment that a lot of that lens flaring is probably there, as for the trailer to kind of, get people, I mean, they're so used to it with the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films that I think it's definitely meant to kind of, catch the eyes of those people that are used to that visual style of Star Trek, and to kind of bring them in to this show. Yes, the show's supposed to be in the Prime Timeline. We're going to talk about that issue in a minute. Okay, but I mean, it has a lot of that sheen from the Kelvin Timeline movies. The Kelvin Timeline movies are the reboots that J.J. Abrams helmed for the first two, and then the just amazing and far better director, in my opinion, Justin Lin, did with the also equally amazing film to me, Star Trek Beyond. I mean, that movie just delivered so much. So anyway, like, I think, and then, or the big assessment, I guess, more so, wasn't just like to attract the eyes of people with the lens flare, but was perhaps to hide some finished effect shots, like put in some cheap lens flare to, just to say, okay, well, this production shot's not done. We don't have all the background sets, so put in a lens flare and people will get it. I could certainly agree with that, that assessment, that's why there was so much lens flare. Hopefully it isn't actually a part of the show. We don't need that. But that's not to say that, and this is really kind of the first thing to talk about with Star Trek Discovery. If you don't know what Star Trek Discovery is about, I guess maybe I should talk about that first, then I'll talk about kind of more what we saw. So what has been stated about Star Trek Discovery, what it's going to be about. And this has been subject to change quite a bit. A lot of actors that are on board have completely changed roles over the past few months. This has been one of the rockiest productions pre-productions and productions that I can think of in recent memory. I mean, like, there has been so many changes. They lost Brian Fuller, who was one of the reasons that people were very excited about it, because Brian Fuller's off doing American Gods, though maybe he went away because everything that the show was supposed to be about changed. Now, it's a good bet that the trailer we saw is likely all footage from like the first two-parter pilot episode, which will end up airing on CBS, and then the rest of the other 13 episodes is going to be a 15-episode run, which is 2 extra episodes, which is good because when you get a couple extra episodes, that announcement was made yesterday as well. When you get a couple extra episodes added onto a season, that shows network confidence, because that's millions of dollars getting laid down to make a couple extra episodes. It's not just something cheap that you can do. Even if it's, I forget what they call them, if they call them tank episodes, where it's an episode where you just use sets that you already have and you don't really, like they're cheap to make. Even so, you still got to pay the actors. I mean, no matter what, you're laying down millions of dollars, for this. So anyway, it's been a rocky pre-production and a rocky production, no doubt about it. Like, I mean, in fact, I've recently said on Sovereign Tech, I think either Sovereign Tech Prime episodes or on a Patreon episode, that like I was debating whether or not this thing was actually getting made. Like, is this thing even going to ever come out? There's a chance it still won't come out. I mean, because things still sound like quite a mess. They look gorgeous, but even the trailer looks like a bit of a mess. Like I said, we're going to talk about that here as we go forward. So Star Trek Discovery, it takes place, according to the trailer, now we have this more officially, it takes place 10 years before Kirk. Now here's the thing, is that here's the first part of the ambiguity of this fucking trailer. Okay, the trailer was largely good, but I mean, it is riddled with problems if you're actually a Star Trek fan. That's where the problems come in. For everybody else, which is probably more what this trailer was meant to attract, it wasn't meant for the hardcore Star Trek fan, because I don't think the show is meant for the hardcore Star Trek fan. It doesn't matter to you. But anyway, it says 10 years before Kirk. So is it 10, and I haven't seen anybody else bring this up. Is it 10 years before Kirk is born? Or is it 10 years before the original series starts? Right? Because those are important factors. Because if it's just 10 years before the original series starts, that means the Enterprise is out there, Captain Pike is on it, and Spock is Captain Pike's, not even his first officer, but his science officer. Of course, Majel Barrett would be playing the part of number 1 if you saw the episode The Cage from 1964, which was the original pilot for Star Trek, the original series, with Kirk and company. And so if it's then okay. In fact, honestly, though, even if it's 10 years from when Kirk was born, the Enterprise in the Prime Timeline, which supposedly the show is in, I think that might still be around, because it would just be under Captain Robert April. Because understand that when Kirk in the Prime Timeline, which again is original series, Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, all that, right? Well, the Enterprise is shared by both the Kelvin Timeline and the show Enterprise is shared by both Kelvin Timeline and the Prime Timeline. Because in that you have in the Prime Timeline you have Robert April, and like I said, and Kirk inherits the Enterprise. Like it's kind of gone through a refit, which you can tell from The Cage, and it's already been out there on a 5-year mission and doing other things. Now in the Kelvin Timeline, when Kirk takes the Enterprise, it's like almost a brand new ship, So that you got to keep that in mind. And I want to get into that Prime and Kelvin thing in a minute. So this is 10 years before Kirk. Again, we don't know what exactly that means. Frankly, by the age of Sarek in it, Sarek is in the show, as in Spock's dad, Ambassador Sarek. The age of the actor in it and how he looks, it almost looks like it could be from when Kirk wouldn't even be born yet. He looks very young, because you see Sarek, of course, the great Mark Leonard plays him in the classic original series episode, Journey to Babel. So I don't, that 10-year line, it's one of the first things the trailer says. And I don't think people are asking enough questions about that. Does it mean 10 years before he's born? Or does it mean 10 years? I mean, and honestly, if it's 10 years before he's born, it would actually work out better. Okay. Because then even if it's still in the Prime Timeline, it would explain why it can have this look of the Kelvin timeline that you're used to seeing, because the Kelvin timeline, I'm already getting I'm already getting into this without describing what Discovery is. Okay, so all right, I'll try and touch on this quick. So the Kelvin timeline starts with the event of the 2009 movie called just Star Trek with Christopher Pine, not to be confused with Christopher Pike, where the Romulan / Borg, you only know that if you read the comic, whatever. Nero, the character of Nero, the Romulan Nero, he goes back in time and destroys the USS Kelvin, which is being helmed by George Kirk, Captain Kirk's dad. Now, when Nero, was it the Narada was the name of his ship? When the Narada appears in the timeline, goes back in time from the future, which it's from the future after Romulus is destroyed. It creates this alternate timeline, okay? But when you look at the USS Kelvin, it looks a lot like what you're seeing in Star Trek Discovery. And so it'd be a great way to kind of explain that, is if what it means by it being 10 years previous to Kirk even being born, is that you get this, you're getting a show that, first off, has 10 years between itself and the movie Star Trek, the 2009 movie Star Trek, as well as 10 years before anything that could happen in the Prime timeline. So it ends up being a show, just like Star Trek Enterprise, that can be shared by both universes. And I think that'd be really cool. Like, I am totally okay with that if that's what they plan on doing. But anyway, let's talk about Discovery. So we're not sure what year it takes place in, even though it says 10 years before Kirk. That's an ambiguous statement. But it takes place before the original series, either way, or it takes place, to some degree before the 2009 Star Trek film. And it deals with, so what you see in the trailer, there's a lot of ship action. You see the main character, which is, what's her name? Michael Burnham, Commander Michael, I'm guessing Michael? I don't think that they're just using a funny spelling of Michelle, but Commander Michael Burnham, who is played by Sonequa Martin Green from The Walking Dead fame, and she looks fantastic. And I love the idea. This is one of the things that they've been saying very early on with Star Trek Discovery, is that the main character actually isn't a captain of a starship. Even though, ironically, Michelle Yeoh's character, who is playing Captain Philippa Georgiou, she is, I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right, but she is like she's the captain already, and she says she's known Commander Burnham for 7 years. But she's the captain of the USS Shenzhou, and she makes a claim it's time for her to become a captain on her own, and that's the thing, is that maybe this whole show is about Commander Burnham becoming a captain in the future, right? And this is why, because one of the things that the show is supposed to do is there's supposed to be like 3 starships that it's supposed to center around, because you don't even see the Discovery, which is the namesake of the show, is Star Trek Discovery. So you never see the USS Discovery, which we've seen in the initial, even though they're going to be changing the design of the ship, we saw in the initial kind of teaser way back at San Diego Comic-Con. And Brian Fuller was showing it off, which, again, he's not involved in the show, except for the pilot. He did write those 2 episodes, so that's something to keep in mind. But anyway, you do see the Discovery in the poster art that they released yesterday. They did release a poster, and the Discovery is there, and it looks a little bit different. The engines look a little bit kind of behind, they're going back a little further than they did in the original little concept video that was released at San Diego Comic-Con. So, yeah, you never see the Discovery in this, and we know you never really see the Discovery because you never see its captain, which is, was it Jason Isaacs, who's supposed to be playing Captain Lorca, who, we know Commander Burnham is supposed to be working with. But Commander Burnham's kind of the lead character, and I think that's cool. And if we're going to, if it's going to switch between different ships and all this different stuff going on, it kind of sounds almost like Star Trek Beyond, where they're sort of out in the frontier. And maybe this is like some kind of fleet action, where, and maybe Michelle Yeoh's character is ends up becoming like a fleet captain or a commodore or something like this. Something that I would not be opposed to, depending upon when the show's actually taking place. If they take, what was her name, Admiral Paris from Star Trek Beyond, which is played by, I forget the actress's name. She's great. She's she's one of the lead characters in The Expanse. She's an Indian actress. Anyway, if they brought her in, because her parts were added in extra to Star Trek Beyond, like much later in production, and they seem kind of like bit parts. And I actually said then, when they were talking about her getting put in, I said, I wonder if they're going to use her for the show. I think she could fit into this, and maybe maybe we'd have Fleet Captain or Fleet Admiral Paris or something that would be calling all these shots in dealing with the Klingons, because the Klingons are also the next big part of the trailer. We're going to talk about them because they look very strange in it. But anyway, so Star Trek Discovery, all we knew that the show was supposed to be about potentially like 3 starships. We knew about the Shenzhou, we knew about the Discovery, there might be another one. This Commander Burnham character, and we knew Michelle Yeoh and Jason Isaacs and all these people were coming in, and there's various alien creatures on the bridge, which is nice to see that diversity of aliens. Not just, it's nice to see diversity as far as humans go as well, but it's good to see the diversity of aliens, and they're doing their thing, blah blah blah. And then as far as like what, the show is supposed to deal with some very deep issues, like there's a gay character, so there's supposed to be a lot of social issues that Brian Fuller said it was going to deal with. And he also said that, this is going to be like Star Trek you've never really seen before, and to explore, so many aspects of the human condition and everything. And, cool. Okay. So that's basically what we know. From the trailer, it seems like the Klingons are going to be a really big deal in this. Okay. So let's talk about the Klingons, because they're definitely the centerpiece here, aside from the character of Commander Burnham, who seems to be, and here's another little problem. Okay, it suggests, the trailer suggests, I don't know that it was explicit, but it suggests that she's part Vulcan. Part of the issue with that is that, maybe she's only like a quarter Vulcan or something. Somehow they're going to get away with that. But it's made clear in the Prime Timeline Star Trek canon that Spock is the first Vulcan really ever to join Starfleet. And in fact, a lot of times if it wasn't made explicit, it was heavily hinted that he was the only one. Even though you end up, there's that episode with, was it the Changeling? There was the episode with the Intrepid 2, but nobody ever says, it's never made clear if that was, because apparently it had an entirely Vulcan crew, but nobody ever makes it clear whether or not the Intrepid 2 that's mentioned in the original series was a Starfleet ship or just a Vulcan ship. It kind of fucks with the rarity of Spock having another Vulcan that went through Starfleet Academy and everything. Even though that's the thing too, is she's a commander. And at this point, regardless of what 10 years before Kirk means, I don't think Spock would be a commander, because he's not the first officer of the Enterprise. In fact, I'm fairly certain he'd be lieutenant or lieutenant commander. One would assume then that Commander Burnham beat Spock to the punch as far as being the first Vulcan in Starfleet. So there's a bit of incongruency here, okay, already with that. Now, if this show took place in the Kelvin timeline, I don't think there'd be a problem, right? Because that's never made clear that he's like the first Vulcan in Starfleet or anything along those lines, or the only one. So something to consider. Again, we got to be careful with that 10 years before Kirk line. Now, so for the Klingons, okay, the Klingons look really fucking weird. All right, they have the ridges and all that. Nothing so strange about that. But they have, they don't have their long hair. Like they don't look like the Mongols that they were designed for with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and then more popularly in The Next Generation. But what they do look like, and of course they don't look like the original series Klingons, which were also meant to look Asian, but were representative of really the USSR at the time. They don't have that human look where where they have like the goatees and everything, which they're my favorite kind of Klingons, are the ones from the original series. And when you watch Star Trek Enterprise in the 4th season, you get a great origin story of why don't the Klingons have ridges in the original series. And in fact, in the Deep Space Nine episode, one of the best Deep Space Nine episodes ever made, Trials and Tribulations, which went back in time to the episode Trouble with Tribbles, there's a point where they ask Worf, wait, that's a Klingon? What happened? And he says, we don't like to talk about it. But eventually we found out why, and it's called the augment virus, which is based around the fact that the Klingons were trying to copy the work of Dr. Sung at the time, who is, played by Brent Spiner or whatever, who was trying to bring back the augmented humans from the eugenics wars that, of course, produced, Khan Noonien Singh. So I personally, I know some people think that it's kind of a crazy story to sort of weave together. I thought that the augment virus idea was really cool. Like I dug that. And I have little fan fiction in my own head. At least it's only in my head for now. Maybe it'll become something else in the future, where I play off of that quite a bit, because I think that's cool. I love the Klingons in the original series. They're such a they have such a great look and just kind of a certain badassery to them. And John Colicos, of course, fucking amazing, playing a Klingon. But his core. But anyway, he got to come back in Deep Space Nine. Whatever, we're getting lost in the weeds here. So they don't look like the original series Klingons either. They're not affected by the augment virus. But what they do look like are the Klingons that you barely get to see, though in the deleted scenes you get to see a lot more, of the Klingons in Star Trek Into Darkness, okay, which is a Kelvin Timeline movie, of course. They look exactly like that, in fact. I mean, almost down to them having piercings in the nose. I mean, they don't exactly have that, but I mean, it's amazing how much they look like that, which lends me to believe that, this is kind of the first point to bring up with the trailer. It lends me to believe that there's a chance that whole thing, that this is taking place in the Prime Timeline, like so many other things that have happened during pre-production and production of this show, has changed. That it's actually going to be something that's going to be a show in the Kelvin Timeline, more so than anything. Like, I'm really, really open to that they're going to come out soon and they're going to say, well, actually, guess what? It's in the Kelvin Timeline. Sorry. Or the other explanation, that some people have put out there is that they're, some kind of like offshoot, which used to be the explanation for why the Klingons looked more human in the original series, was that there was like a northern Klingons and there were southern Klingons, and they, either of them looked very different. But then you run into problems with that because, like I said, some Klingon characters from the original series showed up in Deep Space Nine and they had full ridges. They had the full makeup and everything, that you were used to with Klingons, in the 24th century. So, yeah, that... we got issues here. I mean, maybe, I'm open to that they're an offshoot version of the Klingons. There's some kind of different version, because Star Trek has set that up before as well. In Star Trek Enterprise, you have the Andorians, right, which is an awesome race. But the Andorians in Enterprise, you find out that there's actually a kind of a coexistent, related, they're like cousins to the Andorians, and they still live within the Andorian system, called the ANR. And they're albino. They're not blue like the Andorians. They're actually like pure white. And the Andorians are such a fascinating species. I love them because they have four sexes, 4 biological sexes, that it requires 4 of them to have children. I mean, that's such a wild idea. I wish they talked about it more in Enterprise, or in one of, at some point. I think that's badass. But anyway, and the books aren't exactly canon, but in some of the books they explore what a marriage ceremony or a betrothing ceremony or something looks like with 4 people. Is really, really wild. But anyway, so the where was I? Yeah, so maybe that's what this is. Maybe these Klingons are like the ANR to the Andorians. Where they're just some kind of an offshoot, maybe a more violent offshoot or something, and maybe they're even dealing in a different area of space than what, than being near Kronos or something, which is the Klingon homeworld. I'm open to that. I mean, that might be one of the best explanations, unless. The other possibility, like I said, is that unless this show, when it says 10 years before Kirk, it means 10 years before the 2009 Star Trek movie, and we're dealing with the Kelvin timeline, where, things would seem to have, perhaps because of the presence of, because when you read the comic, the prequel comic books for the 2009 Star Trek movie, you find out the Klingons, had some interactions with the Narada. And so maybe because they had those interactions, they solved the augment virus sooner. And so, they could have gotten their ridges back effectively, well before the time of Kirk and the Enterprise. So, really putting this show, I'll probably say this a lot in this episode, putting this show in the Kelvin timeline, first off, I'm totally okay with it. Go right ahead and do that. Like, because I don't mind the Kelvin timeline. In fact, I'm enjoying the hell out of it, especially with the comics, which I featured a couple times on Sovereign Tech. The comic Boldly Go, I love that comic book. I think they got some great things going on with that. And the Star Trek ongoing comic that IDW had been doing in the Kelvin timeline was also just phenomenal. And there's plenty of points where they did crossovers with the Prime timeline. It was really, really cool. And all those are largely treated canon. Because, like I've said before, you get references of what happens in the comic books from IDW in the movies themselves, in Into Darkness, in and in Star Trek Beyond. So, I mean, like I said, I'm having a great time with it. That the kind of the Kelvin timeline Star Trek is treated very much like Star Wars, where everything that's in it, all the media, everything that comes out of it is considered canon now, like ever since Disney took over Star Wars. So, yeah, now there's other things that lend it, within the trailer itself. I mean, again, the action sequences in the trailer are wild. The stuff's beautiful. There's like all the scenes on the desert planet and everything. The beam up sequence, you get to see a classic kind of communicator, which is cool. And the communicator does look very much like ones from the pilot episode, The Cage, which deals with, Captain Pike on the Enterprise. So it could still kind of fit with that. I thought that had a good look. You see what you're guessing is like a primitive version of the tricorder. That looked great. The other aspect that looks very much like when you see the Shenzhou coming down on the desert planet that both Commander Burnham and Captain Philippa, I'm going to say, because I don't know if I'm getting Giorgio right, but anyway, Michelle Yeoh's character, it has a cool look. Like, I mean, it almost looks like an upside down USS Franklin from Star Trek Beyond. It has an NX-01 kind of look to it as well, like the original Enterprise from the show Star Trek Enterprise. So I don't mind that at all. I think it's a cool looking ship. I think what I saw of the Discovery looked fairly cool too, because it was based off of old Ralph McQuarrie designs from Star Trek The Motion Picture. Anyway, so the ship looks good. I don't have any real beef with that. When you end up seeing the bridge and everything, all of that looks pretty good. It looks very Kelvin timeline, very J.J. Abrams, which, we'll make of that what we will. When you see the ship, you do see a warp effect. You see it going into warp. The warp effect looks just like Star Trek, or looks very close to Star Trek Beyond. It does not look like the warp effect that we're used to with Prime timeline shows, where it's just kind of like the star field zipping by and it looks like, almost like acid rain kind of going horizontally, right? But it's white. So that's another thing where it says, maybe this is Kelvin timeline, or at least maybe it's, like 10 years before Kirk ever gets born. And so it's a shared show with both timelines, with Prime and Kelvin. Again, I think that'd be the best thing for them to do, because you already have a precedent for that with the Enterprise being, already considered canon. Star Trek Enterprise, the show, being considered canon. Like in Into Darkness, you actually see the NX-01 and everything, right? And you see the Phoenix, you see all that stuff. So it'd be good to add on to that shared history, in my opinion. So I'm kind of hoping that's the direction that they're going here. The uniforms that everybody, or seemingly everybody in Starfleet is wearing, there is an issue with those. First off, okay, and this is actually my biggest problem with the whole thing. The uniforms look fine. They have a good look. I don't have any issue with them. They look very close to the uniforms being worn on the USS Kelvin. That's worth bringing up, in the 2009 Star Trek film. One of my biggest gripes here, and this has been a problem with Star Trek sort of across the board, is the use of the Delta Shield, or of the symbol. So in the original series of Star Trek with Captain Kirk from the 60s, the emblem on the uniform in the original series was different for every starship. Each starship had a different emblem. They didn't all have the Delta Shield. Okay, they all kind of had like that sort of that pointy star thing that's within the Delta Shield, but they didn't all have the Delta Shield. That's been something of major debate with fans, because like when you go back to the time of Enterprise, it seems like the Delta Shield's all over the place. Even though it sort of shouldn't be. You end up with, eventually, come time of Star Trek the Motion Picture, yeah, everybody has the Delta Shield. Okay, that arrow shape that they're wearing on their uniforms. But originally, in the original series, that wasn't so. So each ship in this show should have, a different symbol. They shouldn't have the Delta Shield, but they do. So now that would fit in, again, with the Kelvin timeline, but, you know, this is supposed to be Prime Timeline. Then you also have my biggest gripe with this show, at least so far. Maybe it'll change in the future. But the women aren't wearing miniskirts. God damn it. That was the main thing that got me excited about it being a prequel show, is that we would end up with women wearing miniskirts. I mean, even in the Kelvin timeline, you know, in Star Trek 2009 and Into Darkness and Beyond, you know, all the female crew members wear, you know, the miniskirt uniforms. You know, there's short sleeve and long sleeve versions of it. I mean, also, I think there were some women that get to wear the pants or whatever, or not get to. I imagine it's a choice. I don't want to seem like it's forced. But yeah, I was disappointed in that. I mean, I was really, really looking forward to that part. And God damn it. I'm serious. Like, I'm half joking, but like, really, I'm also quite serious that I love that. Because, you know, you have to understand with the miniskirt uniforms, look, it's not a sexist thing. In the 60s, like, the miniskirt was such a symbol of liberation. It really was. Read about the history of the miniskirt. It is mind-boggling how much, I mean, people were so affected by the wearing of miniskirts, or at least they acted affected by it, whatever. I mean, the miniskirt was a cultural Trojan horse. I mean, in a great way. You know, it's so rebellious. It was a revolutionary piece of clothing, you know? And so I always loved that Star Trek used that. It's like, well, fuck yeah, you know, carry on the revolution, you know? And so I was really disappointed that the miniskirt's not involved in this. Now, in The Cage with Captain Pike, you know, none of the women like Michelle Barrett and whoever else, they didn't wear miniskirts either. The miniskirts was totally a post-Kirk, or at least a time of Kirk thing. So, you know, yeah, I mean, it's not really breaking any rules. I just wish that they went with the miniskirts. You know, I really, really do. I think that's a loss at style, as well as making a cultural statement, in my opinion. But otherwise, again, the uniforms look fine. Again, all of this looks so Kelvin Timeline. And maybe everything that they're doing, why it looks Kelvin Timeline, is to get those kids that have grown up since 2009, you know, I mean, that's almost 10 years ago now. You know, get them on board with this show saying, oh, yeah, I get it. But again, you know, we got to find out about that 10 year. Like, what the fuck does 10 years mean? Give us a date, because that's very confusing. I mean, because, you know, if it's only 10 years before the original series, then Kirk would be around. Like, there's a chance you'd run into Kirk because, you know, he'd be serving aboard the Farragut under Captain Garvik. So there's a lot of, yeah, they still have a lot to answer. This trailer, honestly, raised a billion more questions than it answered anything. I mean, at least it said, okay, well, they've got to look down. This is something that they're going forward with. I mean, that boosted some confidence. But at the same time, like, there's a billion fucking questions that you're gonna go with here. Now, other people have said that maybe they're not doing Kelvin or Prime Timeline. Maybe they're doing their own timeline. This is a reboot of, you know, an even bigger reboot of the Star Trek universe. You better tell people that now. Don't fucking do it don't put that on the pilot, because you're going to have such a sour taste of people's expectations instantly getting dashed. You're going to fuck things up. You know, because I don't think, like, especially since this is going to be on CBS All Access, like, I don't think the people you're going to have to count on paying for this are Star Trek fans. So you better fucking, you know, please them. I don't think, you know, every kid or the average person is going to be like, oh, the new Star Trek's on there, I got to see that. You know, I want to get CBS All Access. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So in the future, you know, if it doesn't work, look, I mean, this shit's been tried before to some degree in reverse. Like, Star Trek Voyager was originally syndicated, then they made an exclusive on UPN. And maybe they'll do it in reverse, where, okay, yeah, first it's exclusive, but yeah, ratings aren't exactly killing it, so let's go put it on our flagship network. Not that CBS needs any more ratings; it already gets tremendous ratings. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that will all shape up. So I want to wrap this up here soon. Again, you know, I just want to say, like, overall, you know, all of those quandaries, all of those big questions and cruxes, you know, that I brought up. I have to, again, like I said at the beginning, this is a gorgeous looking show, in my opinion. It looks really good. Some people have commented about the acting being a little stale. Well, who knows what cuts and what takes they were using of this stuff. I kind of understand that. I mean, it looked like, to some degree, they could have been using like scenes that won't actually even be in anything. They won't even be in the shows, like Star Trek or like Star Wars has done, many a time, where like with Rogue One, where they famously, like didn't use half the shots that were in the trailer. So maybe it's another case of that. And these are just like, little storytelling aspects, to get you into the universe. I don't know. But just some wild shit going on there. Yeah, but it does look good. I like the kind of the spacesuit that Commander Burnham's wearing. I thought, did I say Burnham? Is it Burnham? This is going to take me a little bit to get used to. So, sorry, Commander Burnham, Commander Michael Burnham. I like the spacesuit that she's using. Very Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the thruster suits, right? I think that's a cool idea, to run with that sort of thing. Again, lots of action going on, and there's a comment that I know there's a lot of people that recently, a lot of people are talking about how science fiction seems to have to look very busy, like a whole lot's going on, and that it's changed a lot from the more methodical and kind of broader look that, say, like the original series had, or even the Next Generation had, and things like this, where people aren't always looking busy. Maybe they're just sitting there, but you're getting a wider shot as to where now, to keep people excited, you got to make it look like everybody's doing something really fascinating and interesting. So there's always a lot going on, a lot of movement on various screens and whatever else. Yeah, maybe that's what's going down. I don't know. I get all of these theories. I understand, why, and maybe there's validity to some, and maybe it's a little bit of all of the above as far as what's going on. This definitely looks like a far more action-packed Star Trek, which I actually don't want. I don't like action-packed Star Trek. I like boring, and I'm dead serious. I like boring, methodical, thought out, cerebral Star Trek. That's when Star Trek's at its best. In fact, I even heard one review of this trailer where a woman was saying, she's like, Star Trek: The Next Generation got to the sad points where like it was like conference room Trek or something. Like everybody was sitting in a conference room. That was some of the best Trek when they were just sitting in a conference room because they were doing the moral play. And so I'm hoping, because the claim was that there would be moral plays in this, I hope we get those. This trailer doesn't suggest there will be anything remotely like that. But I'm still kind of hopeful. So I think whatever, the overall tone that a lot of reviewers are making is they're saying cautiously optimistic. And I'm the same way, cautiously optimistic. I can't wait for it to come out. I want to see it. Even if it ends up being a totally different Star Trek and doesn't pay homage to the Prime Timeline or the Kelvin Timeline, I'm okay with that too. Bring it on. Because frankly, if there was a mirror, like a mirror universe Star Trek, I'd watch the fucking shit out of that. Okay, so I'm okay with alternate timelines. But again, you got to pay that tease. If it's going to be, if it's going to be something special, if it's going to be something unique, a timeline of its own, you better tell people fast. Because if they fucking find out midway through the season, or if they find out in the first episode inside of the first couple minutes, you're going to have a huge letdown, and it's going to color everything else that happens with that show. So that's they better start talking. And with this trailer, like it seems like they showed so much. The fact that they're not letting out a lot of details makes me think, yeah, they're still figuring out a lot of this. This is still a mess. Even though this trailer looked gorgeous, this is still a mess of a production. So we'll see. And I also want to second what other reviewers have said, that I hope there's a documentary about the making of the show, because just the pre-production alone had to be like pulling fucking teeth. There was that great documentary that William Shatner hosted. Was it Captain on the Bridge? About the making of The Next Generation, just the making of it, of getting to the first season. Not even talking about how it was, first, second, third, fourth, fifth season, sixth season, seventh season of The Next Generation. Just what it took to get The Next Generation off the ground. It was a fascinating documentary. Incredible. Like the stories. Woo. I want to see the stories behind this show, because what we know is like just mind-boggling and sometimes mind-numbing. So anyway, yeah, bottom line, I'm excited for this all the same. I'm looking forward, to seeing it. Lots of questions. If it does end up being a Kelvin timeline show, that's fine with me. If it ends up being something that both universes get to pull from, get access to the pool from, kind of like Star Trek Enterprise, that is even better. That might be the best thing for them to do. So we'll see. Well, we'll see how that lines up. I mean, that was ballsy of them to say 10 years before Kirk. Like, you gave a date. I mean, not a clear one, but you gave a time frame. I think that also says is that the show could very well last 10 years. That they're looking at a 10-season show, just to bring that. I mean, that's my opinion on it. Like, otherwise, why be so specific? Like, there's no need to be specific otherwise if you don't already have that kind of plan. And again, the good news was is that they already ordered in a couple extra episodes for the first season. Which shows network confidence. Not that networks really know what's good for them, but at least they're feeling confident that they're willing to put their money down. So hopefully that translates to good shit for us. But there we go. That's it for that. Any other big news that comes down, maybe I'll mention it. Maybe I'll do a Star Trek update at some point or whatever. But either way, looking forward to this. I think Star Trek Discovery is looking good. The link for the trailer is in the show notes for this Patreon only episode. Thank you to everybody for being a patron, of course. You really help make all this extra content available, and you afford me the time. You afford me the opportunity, I should say more particularly, to be able to do it, and it's a real honor always, that all of you are so into this shit, right along with me. Thank you. You don't have to listen to every Patreon episode because some of it has nothing to do with just about anything I do on Sovereign Tech, maybe, but you all still seem to dig it, so I'm glad. Anyway, that's it. Woo. Boy, Newton, yeah, I might have to do Google I.O. just happened. I might have to do a little Patreon special about Google I.O., but that wouldn't be out till tomorrow. And of course, I've got to see, Alien Covenant, baby. I am so fucking ready for this. Here we go. Anyway, I'll see you on the other side, and I'll see you on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode 226 this week. Woo!
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.